You're listening to Two Beers Until Phronesis, a podcast where we discuss the ideas of philosophy, ethics, religion, history, and culture. Alongside regular guests and friends, we discuss some of life's big questions over a few beers. Enjoy.
It's a shame. That's always a good opener, that.
What is?
Just like talking about like something about your normal life to make you seem like a normal person, not just a podcaster.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that is. I find that. Yeah.
Less like we're sat in a room with microphones shoved in our faces.
Okay, so we're back.
We are. I know it's taken us a while to get to this point, but with lockdown and everything, it's not easy. Here we are.
Yeah. So what we've done is because obviously the problem was recording online, the connection kept just absolutely failing and we kept losing whole chunks of podcasts. So what we've done is we've realised that we can record in our own homes separately.
And just play it back as we are.
Yeah. So have that as a backup. So recording online, but then...
your own separate one on.
Yeah,
of it,
and just compiling those two together, which is just a much better way of doing it.
Well, I found it really, really fun having to have Discord up, listening to our conversation, at the same time recording just my audio.
Yeah.
And it was playing back in one part of my headset. My left part was you and the right part was me. So I could hear what I was saying.
So I wanted to talk about a guy called Giambattista Vico.
Ooh, I like his name already. It sounds spicy.
He is a bit spicy. He's from Naples. Does that
super spicy?
The spiciest place.
The spiciest place.
He's kind of interesting. He's kind of weird. And yeah, he believes in giants, or he believed in giants because he was writing in quite a while ago.
When is this? When's he writing?
He was born in 1668.
Okay, so that's not like a little bit in the past.
No, this wasn't like 20 years ago. This was
the way you said it made me think, it was this like a couple of years ago. No, 400 years ago.
So yeah, he was he's quite a sickly, poorly guy. He was always kind of ill. Bit like you seem to be ill all the time lately.
Just a cold.
Yeah,
it's just killing me.
Yeah, he was like homeschooled. A little bit of tragedy in his life. Like couldn't really get where he wanted to at various points in his career. Always ill. So he also wasn't very well known at the time. He described himself as a stranger and quite unknown in his own city. And to be honest, no fucker's heard of him since. I would say, though, he is worth talking about because I think he is actually not only like really interesting and fucking weird because he believed in giants, but I think he does actually have some like very niche influence. You ever heard of Edward Said?
Yeah, of course I have.
Yeah.
The history.
Yeah.
The first part you talk about is Edward Said and his work on the Orient and Orientalism.
Yeah.
It's like a must of most first year history students because it gets you that idea of perspective and scope of world.
Exactly. So he was a big influence on Edward Said and a few other people, like maybe Karl Marx and maybe some others, because this is as much like history as it is philosophy, and that's kind of a large part of where he's coming from. Because this was that kind of weird course that we did at uni. So obviously, for people who don't know, you did history.
Yeah.
I did philosophy, and this was like a course that bridged the two. This was intellectual history of nature, oddly enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't do that one, did you?
I didn't.
He was writing during the time of the Enlightenment. And obviously the Enlightenment is all about, in a nutshell, it's the rise of science and it's the kind of replacement of religious authority. So you've got religious texts being the main source of understanding of the natural world. And you're having this kind of movement culturally where people are like legislating and talking about ethics, talking about humanism, talking about all these kinds of ideas. But weirdly, he's not like a scientist. He's not like a rationalist. In fact, he doesn't like Descartes. He kind of stands in opposition to Descartes. Not that he doesn't like reason completely, but he's more of like a Christian humanist, like a romantic.
So the very early on sort of Enlightenment thinkers where they didn't want to go too much away from the church because of the stigma against, they tried to do a little bit of both. Yeah.
I think a lot of it was he was actually seeing he was reacting against the big movement at the time. He was a bit worried that where it would lead and kind of what it was saying, because Descartes seemed to suggest that everything was solvable by geometry. And a lot of it's kind of like weird religious ideas. Descartes was trying to underpin all of human understanding with maths, basically build from the ground up. That's why he was doing I Think Therefore I Am, because he was like trying to find like the smallest possible point of understanding that was concrete, and then build up from that.
Where consciousness starts, and then you go from there.
Yeah, really. to prove existence.
Of course.
And Vico values reason in sort of the same way, but he doesn't think it can underpin everything. He only thinks it can help solve particular issues. So the natural world, he thinks it's fine to understand, but he thinks that civic life, because this is a large part of his background, he's like a jurist and a lawyer and stuff. He's into like kind of rhetoric. He's bigly influenced by Socrates. I'm gonna leave that in. Yeah, he's bigly influenced by Socrates. I've just forgotten how to speak, mate.
It's all right. We're talking about giants. Bigly works.
Yeah, because giants are very bigly. So yeah, he's
hugely, in fact.
Yeah, he's hugely bigly. He's a fan of oral philosophy, where it all started, and so he's not into like a lot of this like new scientific
reasonable.
Yeah,
reason based.
Yeah. You're doing it now.
I'm doing it.
Oh God. Yeah, he's more of a political philosopher, and it's from that he's trying to understand history and where people are going wrong, where modern historians of his time are going wrong, reading back into the past and trying to understand human society.
Where their methodology is incorrect.
Yes,
basically.
This is why he's a big influence in the methodology of Edward Said.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, I would say he is in line with the Enlightenment. I'd say he's an Enlightenment thinker. I just think he's not what we typically think of as an Enlightenment thinker. I don't think he was anti-Enlightenment. I think he's just
reactionary rather than revolutionary.
Yeah, that. So one of the main ideas he had was Verum Factum. So in 1725, he wrote a book called The New Science.
Ooh, well, that should replace the old one.
I mean, yeah, it wasn't even that new at the time. So,
no.
So he tries to collect all the humanities subjects and conjoin them into one discipline. And it's really weird because, not many people were doing this kind of thing, and I don't think anyone's really done it since. It's quite hard to categorize. I think like the whole point of why we were studying it is basically the lecturers would just show us this shit and be like, what's he saying? Like,
I don't know what he's saying.
No.
Can you figure it out, guys?
Yeah.
I'm doing my doctorate on this.
I think it was one of the worst marks I got. It was quite hard to like go back and research it. So obviously I've done my master's since, but a lot of it is actually quite difficult to get your head around because it's different. Yeah.
So you got to try and get in that mindset of, where is this crazy ill person who believes in giants, and how can I like get into his mindset?
Exactly. Yeah. So he's talking about how societies rise and fall, and he wants to understand that. And he wants to understand it from the point of view of the people back in the day. He doesn't want to, because we use the word historicism quite a lot on the podcast, so he doesn't want to project his own thinking back into the past, which is kind of what he thought was the main problem that people were doing.
Yeah, they're putting their own opinions and looking at the past and coming to the conclusion they'd already wanted to come to, rather than thinking of it from the people's perspective at the time. Yeah.
Which is quite a topical thing, really.
That's everything.
Yeah, it's everything now.
Yeah. Fake news. Coming to the completely different conclusion with the exact same evidence.
Yeah. So he calls this, he has two categories of this. The conceit of nations. By the way, Joe, if you're listening from the podcast, I'm using your essay to basically do this because my own essay was shit. So if you hear any like phrases that sound familiar, that's because I've just fucking copied and pasted parts of your essay.
Oh God, plagiarism at work.
Yeah, that's all right. We're not a uni anymore, so you're allowed. So the human mind is naturally ignorant and arrogant, according to Vico.
Yeah,
so
accept that.
Fabricates facts. Because I think largely the backdrop of this is that he's, so epistemologically, in terms of knowledge, he's what you'd call a constructivist. He doesn't think knowledge is objective. And there's a famous quote associated with him, which is, what is true is precisely what is made. From that, he's not really any kind of scientist that we would recognize today. So yeah, the mind perceives itself.
So there are no absolute truths for him, only whatever people believe is the truth.
Basically, yeah. Again, it's because this isn't the type of thing we're used to dealing with when we're talking about the Enlightenment. It's quite difficult to get a grasp exactly what he's saying because he writes very vaguely as well. He is big on God, and that might be part of it.
What?
So the mind perceives itself but doesn't create itself. And he thinks that you can only have knowledge of something that you create, which is weird. So that's why I think he thinks that certain things are unknowable, like the natural world.
Right.
But the civic world, the world of society, he thinks is knowable because it's down...
Part of us.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he doesn't think that reason is the way to know that. He thinks that it's down to this new version of history, or...
The new science.
Yeah, the new science, basically. So God is fundamentally unknowable, but the human cycles of behavior that we create are eternal. So we have a chance to get to know them very well by looking back at ancient history, which is kind of what he does. And a lot of this is actually quite common sense. He's big into like...
simple conclusions.
Yeah, not getting too...
Big question, sorry.
Yeah, he's quite grounded, which is, I suppose that part is refreshing. All the previous historians before him, this is part of that conceit of nations thing, they were shit because they didn't realize that there was a massive bias coming from every single society. Again, it's not like big, complicated stuff, but it's obvious, isn't it?
Well, yeah, what is it? History's written by the victors. Yeah,
that kind of stuff. And that they project their attitudes backwards. So Christians project their attitudes back onto pagans.
Yeah.
And the history, this whole idea like cyclical history, that it comes in cycles and human behavior repeats itself.
Well, we know that to be true just from the fact there's 2020 and 100 years ago we had another pandemic that went out of control.
Yeah, exactly. And every society, and he's talking very broadly at this point, he's talking about like the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians, even I suppose the Chinese. He thinks that they developed this idea that they are the first truly civilized people, and that they're the first to have the comforts of
civility.
Yeah, and that everyone before them were barbarians, which I think is a very good observation, actually. But he thinks they're all wrong because that's just their hubris talking.
Yeah,
and that's
not a fact.
That's their lens, which they see previous world from. And the whole idea that national prejudices distort the truth, and that ancient texts has never been understood on their own level. So this is the thing. When we look back at like Greek society from the Renaissance or something, the Renaissance think they're the first civilized people, but actually the Greeks were.
Yeah.
The Greeks think they're the most civilized people, but actually the Babylonians or something were.
Yeah.
So not only is human behavior cyclical, but their history telling is as well, because they're constantly going back, oh, we're the first to do this, we're the first to do this. So they're learning from... So even if you look back at the ancient texts, you're actually looking at people that were biased also. So you're always looking at bias. So the only way to cut through that is to study the very, very first people.
But how would you get there?
Well...
Unless you go all the way back to like what Sumerian texts and Gilgamesh.
Yeah.
All that lot.
A lot of it is... I don't know where he's come up with this.
Because those are the first ones, the first written texts we had.
I mean, I don't know exactly what he had available at his disposal when he was doing this. But it just seems like fucking guesswork, because all the common sense just stops. And he's like, yeah, so these 100-foot tall people, and it just yeah. So this is where the giants come into it.
Okay.
There's another one called the conceit of scholars, which is the same kind of thing. Anachronisms that are moral or intellectual from individuals rather than the whole of society. Yeah, basically what we were saying, bias, and just another form of it, or an interlinked form of it. So he suggests if you look at mythology rather than traditional sources,
that's always good.
You
Good
find,
start for any thesis.
Yeah,
look at the mythology rather than the facts that you have available. Yeah,
but he thinks the facts are flawed. So he's like, well, the mythology must have some kind of truth to it.
I guess if you're going down that reason, that makes sense, doesn't it? Though.
I mean, it's like, because I thought, he's being like figurative, like Homer or whatever, because
Homer talked about giants as well.
Yeah, Homer talked a lot about giants, so maybe he just wants to understand Homer on his own level. But he's like, no, he literally thought that the very first people were massive blokes.
Right.
It gets weirder. So
okay, tell me more when you've read your notes.
I will. Because he's recognizing these conceits, he thinks that we're not equipped in the modern day to really look at primitive cultures, as he calls them. So, like I said, he wants to go right back to the first fundamental people, and he thinks these are the first men. And he comes up with 3 ages, the true understanding of history. yields recognition of 3 ages. The one is the age of gods. And this is where the giants come in.
Okay.
It just goes for it. Just starts talking about
straight in.
Yeah. This is a direct quote. We must begin our discussion at the point when these creatures began to think humanly. Yet, as I sought to discover the manner in which the first human thought arose in the pagan world, I met with arduous difficulties, which have cost me a full 20 years of research to overcome. For I had to descend from today's civilized human nature to the savage and monstrous nature of these early people, which we can by no means imagine and can conceive only with great effort.
Hasn't he already done himself in by the fact that he's calling them savages and pagans? Where he doesn't want to judge people by his modern standards, yet it's judging them as pagans.
Well, he thinks it must have started from simple beginnings. And yeah, weirdly it is. It is just like a Christian projection, but I don't think even he realises.
Well, no, yeah. I didn't think he would realise if his end goal is to get rid of prejudice. He goes straight in there with prejudice.
So he says, ancient men, so he's talking about these sort of paganistic... Again, pagan in this context doesn't really mean like...
ritual sacrifices, anything other than Christianity, basically.
Yeah, it's not like people at Glastonbury. It's like anyone outside of the Christian world or before it or whatever. So he says they were, this is a direct quote, stupid, insensate, and horrid beasts. That is, giants in the proper sense. And I remember this came up in the lecture and I was like, wait, what, like actual giants? He's like, yeah, in the proper sense, it's literal. So
giants, all right.
So he basically thinks their metaphysics, their way of explaining the world, sprang from senses and imagination because they couldn't use reason. They use poetry to express everything. And I think he's kind of getting a lot of this from like Homer and stuff.
The fact they don't actually write a story like we know it today, where it is just epic poems.
Yeah. There's a lot of the Christianity leaking in because he thinks like wonder is the work of God. And these people, because they were so stupid, they were in wonder of everything.
Yeah.
And so everything was divine to them. So everything was a religion and everything was very kind of primal and raw in the way that they expressed themselves and thought about the world around them. Yeah, he bashes them constantly. I guess it's not really bashing, but it's like he basically thinks they're like so strong and they're violent and they just shout and grunt and they think the heavens is a living body, which I guess, I suppose we kind of found that with like Neolithic, what we know about some of the earliest religions and things. I guess he's not wrong in the sense that, well, a lot of this, I guess, is accurate. And weird things like, Jupiter was trying to speak to them, and through the whistling of his bolts and the crashing of thunder, and they interpreted that as this and that. I guess it's similar to like that weird kind of proto-science you get with kind of early tribal understandings of how the universe works. They hear a bash and they project
their own imagination onto it.
Yeah, they project like human thought onto it. The mountain erupts, they think something's angry. Yeah, so it's that kind of thing basically. And everything is allegory for these people. Everything is like a metaphor, even like speech, myth, nature, communication, it's all personified and blended into one. And that's his age of gods. And this is where he thinks the giants come from.
Right.
Yeah, it's really bizarre, but I actually think it relates directly to a few.
Does he talk about where they came from?
No, he just
says giants with a start.
Basically, yeah. He talks about where they go. He talks about
and he was published. If I tried to write any of this in an essay, I'd fail. They would laugh at me and go, "Bertie, do you have any references?" Oh no, it's just giants.
Yeah,
just hear me out, guys. Just hear me out. Giants.
That's what I mean. Like this is one of the things we brought up when we were learning it. It's like, well, does he say why? It doesn't. He doesn't at all. He just assumes, the first people, they were massive and they were really violent and they were this and that. And it's like, well, yeah, but why? And I think, as we'll talk about with like other giant myths and things, it was just a very common prevailing theory throughout lots of different cultures that giants existed. Before we just get onto that, I was just going to say, the next age is the age of heroes.
Oh, okay. Now we're getting into like age of mythology.
Yeah. Age of empires. So the natural law of nations arises among various peoples. So all these scattered giants, they all come up with the same natural laws, which are an extension of their sort of base personalities. But they basically work out that more or less this is basically his explanation for like laws and then why things are, why civility even exists from like a psychological perspective. But he basically thinks that big giants protected smaller giants, and from that, moral virtue begins. But it has to be like a really conscious effort. They had to like really start thinking for the first time and speaking in order to protect their
little giant.
Yeah, and it was like a weird feudalism with these giants. It's so like it's like fucking Lord of the Rings for no reason.
Yeah,
just really strange. So yeah, the giants reversed their customs. They stopped walking around in the great forest, as he calls it, and they settled down with a lifelong mate in a cave. And they're no longer chained under the mountains by their frightful religion of thunderbolts. Very, very evocative stuff.
Yeah. Paints a pretty picture.
Yeah. So yeah, property begins, commonwealths form. Yeah, like fiefdoms, and it's more than just like a bully or someone who protects things. It actually becomes mythologically a hero.
Right.
And kind of less grotesque and savage over the ages.
So they get smaller and they become just people.
Yeah, basically. They rein in their violent passions and lose some of their imagination in the progress and their wonder. And so they kind of strangely lose a little bit of hubris and gain it in other places. And then there's the Age of Men, which I think influenced Karl Marx the most. This is about more of a leap of faith and less reason to get rid of all your bad sort of stuff. You have to consciously like create a society. And this is I was just thinking about shit like AA when he I don't know why he says with a cider in his hand. No, but like when we talked about AA in the past, like you have to give yourself into a higher power. That's like the highest step.
Comes up every time we do a podcast. We talk about AA because most of the time when we do podcasts, even if they're not related to it, we always end up talking about higher power and why do people give themselves to religion? And it's because you get rid of stress. It takes all of the control out of your hands and puts them into something else. So you go from suddenly you're the one worrying about, I need to stay alive for these reasons. I need to keep myself healthy. And you're like, do you know what? The gods deal with that. If I go out in the night and dark, it's in the gods' hands if I come back or not. And you're less afraid of it. And
it's the idea of needing it, like that we need it to function, as opposed to we can just do it on our own steam. Because he basically thinks if you do it on your own steam, then you're no better than a giant. God comes in and helps you. He takes away. Because your free will can't be trusted on its own.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's Vico.
Controlled free will.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Well, that is what predestination is, isn't it?
Well, yeah. So yeah, that's Vico.
Well, he sounds fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And, it's the sort of thing I'd love to read. I think it would make a really good movie.
I think it would make a really good doorstop.
A doorstop.
Yeah, it sounds more like fantasy than anything else.
Than a scientific book called New Science.
It's weird that it came out in the Enlightenment, and it's even weirder that my lecturers chose that as like the centerpiece for that module.
Well, it makes sense because usually they'll pick
Descartes,
hugely influential and important people, where you can sit there for hours going over it, trying to find all the meanings in their works. And I think it's important they give you this because they can just show you how much of a spectrum the Enlightenment and the end of the Renaissance was. Because you can go from giants without any rational thinking, really, just his belief in giants at the start, to, Karl Marx and the end of it.
Yeah, I've got mixed feelings on it because I do think it's important to read unknowns. And in a sense, he's not actually an unknown because he did actually end up influencing a lot of people. At the same time, I just think I spent fucking hours and hours reading this bollocks.
Yeah.
And barely any of it went in anyway. And it was constantly glancing at my notes right now. But yeah, I kind of feel like there are more important conversations to be having in in both history and philosophy.
You'd think that, but here we are doing a podcast on it.
Yeah, well, this is fun.
Yeah, because he's a sort of podcast topic, not the sort of, here's 4 months of your life dedicated to this one essay that you need to write on this guy who believes in giants.
Yeah, but I think ultimately there are ways to read him, and like I said, I think you get a slice of history. You get that whole what were intellectuals thinking about the Enlightenment as it happened that weren't like prominent moving figures of that Enlightenment. What did sort of weird, edgy Christians at the time think? And this will tell you what they think. Giants.
Yeah. Well, you get that a lot, though.
Oh, I should say, the giants are made out of shit.
Well, that makes sense. A lot of giants are made out of clay and earth, aren't they?
Yeah, like golems, yeah.
Yeah, like golems, or Tolkien had dwarfs created from clay. Humans, in the sense of like mythology, are most often either made from clay by the god, or they're brought into existence just by him, okay? And anything else is created of the earth. And I think it's purposefully to give the idea that mankind is not of the earth, but is of a heavenly power. Well,
Adam's made out of dust.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's like cosmic dust or like...
Yeah, because he creates him out of thin air dust, because there's nothing there, is there, really?
Yeah, dust is like the closest thing to nothing.
Yeah.
It's like the closest thing to creatio ex nihilo you can get.
He's created out of the cosmos, like against everything else in terms of...
Yeah.
Whereas other things are created from the earth, and, like Greek mythology, you've got Gaia, who is the earth, and everything is from her, basically. Including humans. Obviously, humans are made from clay in Greek mythology. Which is why they're not heavenly beings, because the gods are the heavenly beings.
Yeah.
Whereas in Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, they're created from God himself.
Yeah.
As a cosmic spiritual being. And giants are obviously just like shit made of clay. Because they're just brute and no consciousness truly to them.
But the giants evolve into us. I don't understand.
Yeah, well, that's why he's very...
Does he even believe in evolution?
No.
Maybe,
you know what? So weird.
Maybe I should have read this a lot more, but I've devoted so much of my life to this strange philosopher, and it was a write-off from the beginning. So there you go. That's Vico. If you want to learn more about him, go and read him. We're going to talk more about
giants in general,
giant myths. Yeah. One thing I found about giants generally, through all the folklore and stuff, they're always antagonists, pretty much. I can only think of literally a few stories against the grain. And it's weird how they crop up in all different cultures that aren't connected, but they're always villains. And it ranges from just like the complete lack of imagination, like, oh, big man, to like a Cyclops or maybe even like a stone giant or a frost giant or something that's part of like a ontological like a tier, like it's like a lesser being that exists in another universe, like a Jotun from like Scandinavian folklore.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're always bad guys. Even like Roald Dahl's BFG,
he's the only good one.
Yeah. They're always cunts. They're just horrible. And
I think it is just that the BFG, it makes sense because obviously he's going from previous sources and imagination and fairy tales where they are the bad guys. So he's gone against it to make a new book, and he's decided to have a good giant. But yeah, like all the research I've done, either the giants are only helpful because they've been tricked or enslaved into being useful, i.e. building stuff, or they are, like you said, just cunts and they're just going around fighting people.
Yeah, now this is why I wanted to like bring up Vico at the start, because I think he was sort of onto something in his understanding of giants and relating that back to mythology, that they're not unnecessarily cruel. They're not like a demon. They don't torture people or they're not necessarily unnatural either. They're like almost like a natural force, and they're nasty, but I actually think that's more of a product of the times like they were written in, because a lot of like society was quite savage at the time anyway. So I think they're just like, they're no more savage than like an animal. You have to think about it. Animals are quite fucking savage in the wild and whatever.
They talk and they think still.
Yeah. So to be honest, I think they're just like a reflection of humans. They're just like big humans
Bigger
with
versions of
slightly
humans,
less
yeah.
intelligence. And of course, the natural consequence of that is that they're going to be quite violent.
Yeah.
It's a mirror.
You usually see them, giants, and like the folklore of people killing giants, as a reason for why the people are in that land to begin with. It's usually as a start point for a country's folklore is a fight with giants.
Yeah.
Like humans arrived at a place and found giants there, and they fought them. So you get stuff. I think I've got the notes here. Geoffrey of Monmouth.
Yeah.
That annoying 12th century book, The History of the Kings of Britain, which half of it is just absolute bollocks.
Yeah.
But it talks about how Brutus from Troy founded Britain.
Yeah.
And how he fought giants. That's how people in Britain got to Britain. They fought giants, and they were from Troy. So we're all from Turkey, apparently.
Some of us are. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just, he talks about weird stuff and tries to go, okay, how did this happen? I don't have a good explanation. Giants. Here's those two things. He goes, do you know what? They're together. So I've got some of his stuff. He talks about how the original stones for Stonehenge were from Africa.
Oh, okay.
Right? And that giants brought them from Africa, not to Stonehenge, but to Ireland.
Okay.
And then from Ireland, they were brought back over to the British Isles.
There is a lot of crossover with the myths of, or all the Celtic stuff, I guess, and by extension, I guess, Germanic and Norse stuff that kind of come out. Yeah, it's all a big mixing pot of weird folklore, and no one really knows where it begins and ends.
Exactly.
So why Africa? Maybe it's probably just because that was the furthest place you could think of at the time.
Exactly, yeah. That's my thinking as well.
The most fantastical thing in the medieval imagination. He just goes, that.
And it would make sense given the fact that they're talking about the Mediterranean already in this place, talking about where Britain's originated from, Turkey and everything. So he's already got that Mediterranean mindset for where things should be coming from. It makes sense. So he was just a bit like weird. And then I've got another guy, and it's the 8th and 9th century book called The Ruin. This is the famous one where basically he talks about how giants built all the baths at Bath.
So the Anglo-Saxon
Chronicle, basically.
Yeah. Of the explanation of the Romans.
Yeah, because they didn't know what they were. And it's famous. It's in Vikings, I think, talk about it in the TV show, mentions it. He doesn't even go into detail about it again. It's a poem, and he just goes...
Never does. Yeah.
These wall stones are wondrous. Calamities crumpled them. These city sites crashed. The works of giants corrupted.
Right.
That's it. He mentions giants. He just says giants once in the whole poem. Quite a long poem.
There's this running theme of just giants, and nothing about it.
Just
probably just because it was so
easy,
accepted.
Yeah.
And well, here's the thing. We've talked in the past about sort of functional truth, and that it doesn't really matter if Noah's Ark was real or not, because that's not what's important in the minds of somebody who believes in Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
Someone who believes in Noah's Ark as a literal truth probably they're not going to be convinced by reason, by you saying, well, if could the boat be big enough? That's not why they believe in it. The reason why they believe in it because it has a consequence for how they live now.
If they stop believing that, they've then got to question a lot of other information.
Yeah, and they've built a lifestyle around it. So it's more about a way of life than some kind of logical belief. Because if you try and use logic, you'll realize straight away that logic really isn't a factor in this particular belief. They're entrenched in it because it's
easy.
It makes their life easier. Their actual day-to-day life. That's what the belief is more about than the way we tend to think about beliefs. Maybe as have you got enough evidence for that? Is that So I think that kind of from that vein of thought, a lot of people thought like that in the past. So that's
why they're very quick to just go.
Yeah, because I think it's metaphor. Basically, as an easier way of saying it.
Yeah.
Often, I think giants are characterized as a relic of an older age.
Yeah, of people before.
Yeah.
That when they turned up to these, I like to think there's no evidence for anything I'm going to say. I'm just going to say shit now, and
you're being like Vico.
Yeah, we're going to see what sticks. I think when they mean giants, and I'm on about the original people of land, not just giants built this. I think it's Neanderthals.
Yeah, I think pretty much if you take the word giant out and replace it with Neanderthals or any other like
it makes sense.
The first Homo sapien, yeah,
they don't, as we know from science and evidence, they were not as smart. They weren't as advanced. They had language, but not as we would, or even back then considered language. They have like grunts and sounds, so they would seem even to people back then as savage. Even though we would consider ourselves back then savage.
Again, I think Vico didn't predict his own mistake. He's projecting a savagery backwards in time, which is one of those cyclical things. Everyone projects a savagery back in time, and I think he's right in the sense that they were quite savage, but they were also astonishingly brilliant, and maybe that's what the metaphor of giants is meant to represent, because the things they built, given virtually no tools, some of the Stone Age things you can see still around are brilliant. Jainism. There's like
the history of Jain. Yeah,
you don't know what Jainism.
No clue. Go on.
It's a part of the family of Hinduism. So Hinduism's the oldest. Then you've got Buddhism and Jainism. They all believe in reincarnation. Those kind of things. Okay. Jain cosmology has giants existing in a previous age, and you have Native American tribes. Some of their legends revolve around tribes of giants. And also, and again, these are always before, like they never exist in the same time.
In the current, which is again why I think they're like Neanderthals.
Yeah, or just
early humans.
Yeah, early humans.
What they perceive themselves to have come from and where they are now.
Yeah, and a way of asserting that they are now better or something. The Aztecs had a similar thing called Quinametzin, which apparently created cities in a kind of like a previous solar era, which is weird because different continents, completely different continents. There's Japanese and Chinese giants and things. And again, so what are we counting as a giant? Because are we counting ogres? Are we counting trolls? Are we counting Cyclops?
I count all of those as giants.
Yeah, they're certainly types of giants. Yeah,
types of giants.
The types of giants we've been discussing so far, they've been like humans.
That's why I was thinking. of like humanoid giants. But I mean, Cyclops is the basic humanoid giants, but just with one eye.
The Cyclops is a particularly interesting one. There's actually some paleontological. That's not it, is it?
No, but that sounds good, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't really. There's some paleontology that suggests that's the way.
Paleonific. Oh, that's a good word. That sounds good.
Yeah. So there's fossil evidence. I'm going to say that. Yeah,
he's done it, boys. He's done it. He's in the typical dyslexic thing. I just can't say the word. So whatever word's closest, I'll rearrange a whole sentence to fit it now.
So I think there's two reasons why people believe in Cyclops, and I think they both feed into each other.
Okay, let me see about this.
There's another big word I'm going to pronounce. Proboscideans. Yeah. Big giant elephants, basically.
Oh.
From a previous age.
Oh, from Lord of the Rings.
Mama kills.
Yeah.
Oliphants.
Yeah, Oliphants.
Mr. Frodo is a fucking Oliphant.
Look how tall it is. Fuck. Reform the line.
Christ, look at the whiskers on that. They didn't live in the Mediterranean along with humans. They had died out a long time before. Okay. So we're talking like mammoths.
I was about to say, it's basically just woolly mammoths.
Yeah, there's lots of other things with like tusks on their top lip and their bottom lip. The one that they think is the big contender for this theory is the Dinotherium.
We've got actual fossil evidence of this.
So it's an elephant, yeah. It's basically
a big elephant.
Yeah, it's a big elephant. So we're talking potentially, well, I mean, it definitely exists, but I don't know whether this is what they would have found. Twice the size of an African elephant. So
that's big.
Yeah, fucking huge. Or it could have been these tiny little things that are the size of like swans. They used to walk about around the Mediterranean, and we found sort of evidence of them on places like Cyprus and Sicily. So one of the things is if you look at their skulls, especially if they're broken, they do look a lot like human skulls, just with a giant eye socket in the middle, because that's the nasal cavity.
What, these big elephants?
Yeah, because you'd think it's just like a massive human skull.
Huh.
You know that like an elephant fetus looks quite like a human fetus in the womb.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the skull can look similar if it's broken in a certain way. And it depends how many they found. But this is just one theory. Yeah, it would seem that I think if someone from that time saw that, they would, because of the big hole in the middle, they would think that's a giant eye socket. So that's one reason why they might have thought that Cyclops existed. The other thing is, like, mostly these would have been around places like Turkey and Spain, so they would have been in foreign places predominantly anyway, these fossils. Yeah. And I think largely the Cyclops is a metaphor, or at least kind of embodies the idea of ancient Greeks kind of fearing the unknown or whatever. And so they would have seen these things and go, oh, what the fuck's that? Because even an elephant, even if they knew what that was, it's a far off place, big creatures or whatever. And I think there's this running theme throughout Greek poetry and stories of, like, the thing from far away is bad.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, the fossil stuff and this, the kind of like the function of the myth, like, they feed into each other. But yeah, no, I think that's probably why people thought that, because where most of the Cyclops myths are, there are also these fossils.
Yeah, especially if you said in Spain, because obviously the Greeks and the Phoenicians colonized very early on the Mediterranean.
Mm. Yeah, there's Cyclops stories in France. There's Cyclops stories in Arabian mythology. Cyclops is actually quite a common thing. Huh. Yeah, the Greek giants kind of confuse me though, like the general Greeks, because they're often, even the Greek historians mix them up with Titans
constantly.
And I'm not really sure the difference.
That's why I didn't even bother doing research into it, because because honestly I was looking into it and I was reading this and they had the same name, and then I was reading a different one and it was calling them a Titan, and I was like, no,
they interchange it. Yeah,
no, they're giants, because these are the Titans.
So they're the offspring of Gaia.
Yeah, that's why I was talking about earlier. When I said they're created of the earth.
Going back to the savagery thing, they're born of the sort of the violence of the gods as well. I think they're like linked to volcanoes and earthquakes, but I'm pretty sure Titans are as well. So yeah, who fucking knows?
Again, interchangeable.
I see. I wouldn't count ogres just because they're a thing of fiction.
Yeah,
like the most famous example of an ogre is like Puss in Boots, which is the fucking thing from Shrek, isn't it?
Oh yeah,
Antonio Banderas. And ogres are more like orcs, aren't they? Like,
yeah,
I think, like,
and they have layers as well. That's
they
another thing I know.
Yeah, get out of my swamp.
Yeah, they're things purely of fiction, whereas giants are in so many, and cyclopses, etc., are in so much mythology that there has to be some basis for it. There has to be, you can't just have it be everywhere and it just be completely made up and they will come to the same conclusion. There's got to be something there, which is again why I think it's Neanderthals. I was trying to think of another example of like an idea or a belief that's everywhere, and I came to the idea it's pyramids.
Yeah, ghosts.
Pyramids and ghosts. Pyramids are everywhere, and pyramids are everywhere because it's an easy thing to build. You come to that conclusion quite quickly. You can build quite tall pyramids because you don't need to go like up in a square. So
yeah, this is why people go aliens, because it's like South America and Africa.
It's like, no, pyramid's easy to build, guys.
It's triangle.
It's a triangle with
it's
four sides.
And I do also think it's the same with giants. Like it's a big man.
It's a big man.
It's not, but I do think it's similar how like there must be something psychological that pervades all the stories, because they're always an antagonist. I was thinking about Norse mythology. Are you familiar with like a
little bit
Jotuns?
Yeah.
If anyone's watched
from Jotunheim,
if anyone's watched Thor, Thor: The Dark World is the Dark Elves. This the first Thor with all the Dutch angles. That's the one with the
first one is where they go to Jotunheim at the start, and because he goes and attacks them, and that's the reason he gets exiled in the first place. Because Loki was like, "You shouldn't do that."
So Loki's a frost giant, half frost giant, or is he?
Frost giant,
or is he just a small one? I can't remember.
I don't know. I wonder which part of him's the frost giant bit that we never see.
Yeah, you think he was shortchanged, and then fuck's sake, why are we talking about Loki's willy? Right.
I was about to say Loki's also known as the snake.
Those things in Game of Thrones, they're basically frost giants, aren't they?
Yeah.
What are they called?
White Walkers.
White Walkers, yeah.
Which are, funny enough, the first men turned into them. Again, another narrative of the evil people are the originals.
The thing is with Jotuns, they're not actually bigger than people, or at least it's kind of ambiguous as to whether they are or not. Because They could be big. They could be just the same size. They could be really ugly. They could be
I guess
really,
there's no unit of measure back then.
really beautiful. Well, yeah.
10 feet tall. What's a feet?
Yeah.
What's a foot?
What's a feet? Fucking hell.
Tell the old Rosie's getting to me now.
Yeah. So, yeah, frost giants may not be giants in the sense that we're discussing. Yeah.
They don't actually use a word that would translate to giant. It's something we've projected onto it.
Yeah. I think the fire giants are just about the same. So, you know, in Ragnarok, when there's that thing called that Surtur thing that's going to...
Yeah. So I will destroy all of...
Yeah, and he's dangling on the chain.
Yeah.
Asgard.
Asgard, yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, one second, I'll come around to you.
And he becomes as big as a mountain. And that's actually, that's a fire giant. So that's like, there are also mountain giants, but that's more of a giant. But I think there's also kind of a golem as well, because they're like associated with nature, or they're like, this is another prevailing theme of giants. They're never unnatural. They're not like an orc or an ogre. They're always either just as natural as humans, or they are humans, or they're
more natural,
synonymous with nature. Yeah, like a troll in Norse mythology.
Well, I've actually got written down here as one of my own notes is that it seems that giants became less of a physical and more of a spiritual being, synonymous with rivers or mountains, rather than being just people that were large. Just thought I'd put that there.
Yeah, no, I think they did. I think that's since changed with like modern video games.
Yeah.
Do you have giants in? You played the Witcher game?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have giants in that?
No, you got trolls and stuff.
Yeah. Giants are in Skyrim, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just like big oafish
with the big huge mammoths.
Yeah.
Funny enough.
Ooh.
It's
all coming together.
We're onto this, guys. Exposed.
Unlocked.
We've got you, Bethesda.
They're just all like oafish and
outlandishly silly.
Yeah. They're just easy to trick.
Yeah.
I think that goes back to Homer's depiction of the Cyclops, where they just like... See, they never beat a Cyclops with brute force, but they're not even that big. Any sort of big creature... I suppose this goes back to the Abrahamic myths as well.
David and Goliath.
Yeah. He just like fucking cunts it in the eye.
I was literally about to say, I can't believe we've done the whole of this podcast and we've not brought up David and Goliath. I was really proud of ourselves. Here we go. Christianity's back, guys. No one expected it.
No one expects the Spanish Inquisition. No, I think that I really like the David and Goliath story, because obviously it's taken on this... It encapsulates the underdog.
Yeah.
Taking down the big thing. I also think it's kind of bred an unnatural appreciation of underdogs as well. Like you think of like I was just going to say supermarkets, but I won't go there. Fine, I will. Right.
Go on.
I'm just going to do it anyway.
Go on. If you're going to do it, you might as well.
I've had too much cider. Right. A lot of people just bash big corporate things, big like chains, big organizations, just because they're big. Doesn't matter what they're doing. So you could have like a really grotty sort of greasy spoon that's not ethically sourcing anything. It's not doing, none of all that stuff. But McDonald's is the easy target because it's the big one. Now I don't necessarily like McDonald's that much. Not my cup of tea. But basically, I think that a lot of big companies are actually
pretty good.
And I think
there's a reason they're that big.
Yeah. And especially pub chains, that's probably a better way to go. They get a lot of flack, but they provide job security. You know what I mean?
They're better than the shitty little pub that may not pay you after you've done all the hours.
Yeah.
Because they're paying you cash in hand.
Having worked for both, and I know which one I prefer to sit in. Or no, I like sitting in both, actually. They're both, and there is room for both. And it's the same with like, I hear people criticizing like the Marvel films or like Hollywood trends, and people use this like David and Goliath thing, and it's like, look, there's room for both. You can watch both films. You can watch David Lynch and you can watch Marvel. You can have both. You don't need to like just say,
just hate it because it's big.
Yeah, it's really big and successful. It's like people like self-made millionaires. We were talking about that the other day. It's like just because someone is doing well doesn't mean you necessarily have to
bash them for it.
Bash them, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, David and Goliath.
Well, funny enough, like David and Goliath, the Bible in of itself is a lot of metaphor, and it's a lot of storytelling with like a central theme that you can get from it. And, it makes sense that there's a tiny man fighting a giant, right? It is the underdog story, is don't underestimate your opponent sort of thing.
There are several tribes of
All right, just interrupt me. It's fine.
I was just going to say, there are several tribes of giants.
Yeah.
And Goliath is an example of one of them.
Yeah, it's just they got like a theme of just trying to like teach their own history as well as projecting their religion. Whereas a lot of other ones is...
Yeah, I don't think it's literal.
No. Yeah. And I think out of all of them, the Bible's at least a bit more consistent when it comes to it, and at least goes into a bit more detail rather than, 8th century text that just mentions giants as a single word without barely anything to it, or Geoffrey of Monmouth where he barely talks about giants. It's like, at least in the Bible they go into a bit more detail.
Do you know any of the Welsh giants?
No, but I tried to focus on English mythology, which was the hardest fucking thing in the world, because like I said to you on our walk earlier, there is fuck all English mythology, because English doesn't exist and is an amalgamation of Celtic, German, French, Anglo-Saxon, so like, South Denmark sort of thing, Norse. It's everything thrown together. And it's really hard to find a consistent...
Maypoles, that's it.
Yeah, fairy tale. Whereas like the Welsh, the Scottish, the Irish, and the Cornish...
The Celtic,
The Celtic ones, they've kept their identity. So...
Well, they've
tried to keep it, and
they've kept it aesthetically, and like, I think they sort of have enough to at least get characterize the essence of what the identity of those places are. But I think England is very varied as well. Like a lot of Americans say it to British people, like, oh, it's amazing. You can just walk like 10 feet. You could be in Bath and people are talking very well spoken, and you just go travel a little bit to Forest of Dean, and you got people going, "It's ground."
Yeah, I find that this sort of like lack of a folklore and lack of a common history is something that has huge political impact on our lives today. But there is no universal English heritage, as it were. I mean, that's something that Tolkien tried to create. Tolkien's Middle-earth and his creation of the peoples of Middle-earth and its history was his way of trying to create this English mythology. Even in his notes, he talks about how he was trying to create something in his mind that would satisfy his need for a mythology, because he studied all the Norse and the Celtic, and he longed for an English one because he just felt like there wasn't one present for him to love. There wasn't one for him to like get into.
Yeah, and I think...
Sorry, that was a big...
No.
I proper tangent.
Yeah. Sounds like you've had a lot of cider.
What? That made sense a lot.
Nah. No, I agree. And I think it's a problem that characterizes the modern world. The lack of meaningful history to draw from. Celtic places in the UK at the moment, they can sort of draw from older stories because they're smaller and because they have that sort of that underdog thing as well.
Like David and Goliath.
Yeah. And I think because they're a David, they can sort of go, oh, well, we can draw from a lot more because we're small and whatever. And I think, the moment you start to extrapolate that to a larger place, I think it's easier to do in America, but it's not as easy to do, weirdly enough, in England, which is an older place, or at least is considered older in the continuity of its history. I think the reason why giants just aren't like this big thing anymore, and why in video games they're depicted as like they're easy to overcome, it's just because we're not scared of them anymore. They're not like a realistic kind of force. They're not. I don't know. We've had so many stories. They're never defeated by brute force. They're always defeated by like, oh, stab him in the eye. I don't think they work as a metaphor or an explanation, because we're sort of past that time now. So now they've just faded into like easy opponents.
Obscurity and
just like kind of boring, really boring opponents in D&D. They're just big people, and they're not like an explanation of anybody's history. They're not responsible for the building of anything.
There's no soul to them.
Yeah. Like in Skyrim, they're just these fucking things that just like
attack you wildly.
Herd mammoths. It's like, they're the oldest.
There's no quest line regarding talk to the.
There's one where you have to take a goat back from him because you sold it to him. You can't speak to him. They just sort of wander about, and they're like, it's hinted that they're older than anybody else in Skyrim, but they're not given any sort of prominence. They're just this speechless enemy.
Something to attack. I mean, the first time you go into Whiterun, yes, sorry, not Windhelm. Whiterun, you're there. There's a giant fighting people. That's literally the first thing you get.
Yeah, but and it's seemingly
okay for that to be a thing.
Yeah, the game's so buggy. I don't really like it, but I think someone says something about the Empire asking people to leave them alone, but some of the Stormcloaks, they want to like wipe them out or something. But yeah, that's not really a fleshed out quest, is it?
No,
That's
in passing thing.
Yeah. So one of the few examples where they're not antagonistic or completely villainous or just like a random force of nature is in Welsh mythology. So Brân the Blessed is the English. You know him?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying.
I know him well.
Good mate he is. I saw him on the pub the other day.
So I think his name is Bendigedivran.
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 Bend it like Beckham.
Yeah, that's
Bend it like Beckham, man.
It's not Jamaican. Bendigedivran. But he ruled Britain. Mythologically. It wasn't a real bloke. He could never fit inside a house. It's a very tragic thing. He could never live anywhere because he couldn't fit there.
Oh, that's sad.
So he
didn't fit in.
No, he didn't fit in. Was that a pun? What was it? It's just a terrible joke. The story's incredibly complicated, but it has something to do with... I did have this explained to me earlier. So, the King of Ireland wants the giant's daughter.
As you do.
And asks for a hand in marriage. So he travels over, and then the brother of the daughter says, "What are you fucking doing? I haven't been asked." So why was you? Okay. And so he totally flies off the handle, and he kills all their horses, or the Irish horses. So then the Irish lot get really annoyed.
As you would do.
Right. I can't remember what happens then, but this is a great story. She ends up
edge of my seat.
She ends up living in Ireland with the new husband anyway, after a bit of a kerfuffle. And then she's like, "Oh fuck, Dad, come and get me. He's not nice, this new fella." This is how it's written in like ancient.
Yeah.
So he goes, "All right, yeah." And the Irish guy, oh no, right. So he gives them right. It's fucking terrible.
Fuck.
So after the horses are killed,
yes, and the kerfuffle.
Yeah, he gives them the black cauldron. You know, remember that film, The Black Cauldron?
Yeah.
Yeah, he gives them like the fucking cauldron that can resurrect people. But then the Irish are like, I don't think that was enough. It's like, it's resurrection.
What more do you want?
There's a few horses.
Resurrect the horses.
A pot that resurrects you. Yeah.
Just thinking about putting a horse in the pot, the cauldron now.
Yeah.
Would you put it in head first or like back first?
I don't think they cared about the horses.
Oh.
I think it was more just like a gift to in recompense. So the big fucker, the giant of the king of
the dad of the brother,
Albion, the giant.
Yeah.
Yeah, the king. So the king of Britain, because he's so big, he uses himself to create like a bridge across the Irish Sea, so his troops can invade. Even though he's given them the pot and everything,
that is fucking huge.
Yeah, huge.
They definitely can't fit in.
They're still kicking off. Well, this is the thing. The Irish offer him. The king of Ireland's like, "Oh well, yeah. Sorry your daughter's not being treated well. So we can reimburse you by making you a house that you can fit in." And he's like, "Oh, I could finally fit in."
Yeah.
Yeah. But
so kind.
That doesn't happen. And so like it's horrible. Everyone fights each other. There's only 7 people left at the end. And then the daughter dies of a broken heart because everyone she knows is dead, and it's very depressing. But my point being, he's presented in that story as civilized. He's the king of Britain.
Yeah.
You know, that's that. And I don't think a giant has ever been depicted as anything other than like a simple shepherd, because I think in one of the first Cyclops is just like a random shepherd or whatever. Yeah. And that's about as civilized as they get. They're always like fringe. They're always in the wilderness.
What I was talking to you on the walk was the ones in Wiltshire, which were depicted as farmers, and they milked cows.
Simple folk. Yeah. Oh yeah. You were saying about the
They made a gorge because he dug the ground, made a gorge that his wife could sit in it while they milked their giant cow. Then they got enslaved and forced to build houses. Yeah.
Enslaved by what? What's bigger than the giant?
Just people, because they're easy to trick, aren't they? So they were just made to do things. Again, how do we build something so big? Giants.
Yeah. That's the thing in Tolkien, actually. You know, Helm's Deep.
Yeah. Built by giants.
Built by giants.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think we're done.
We're done? You happy with that?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. It's good to be back podcasting, finally.
Yeah.
We're thinking, this is the only time I've ever done any housekeeping. I don't know if anyone listens this far into the episodes, but we're thinking of doing a Patreon thing or something along those lines. If anyone would be interested.
Connor needs money.
Everyone needs money. It's sad truth of life.
Yeah, I was about to say, everyone needs money.
If you got any suggestions for anything you want to hear or see or feel or smell, just chuck that in the comments. And yeah, if you'd be interested in having a fucking t-shirt or a mug or something, or because
I'd love a mug.
You are one.
Or a pint glass. I think would be more appropriate than a mug.
Yeah, beer glass, 2 beers until phronesis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah,
you can get a little bit of commission on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
2p.
Yeah, that's what it's going to be. If you like this, subscribe, do all that stuff. Technology, cool. See you later.
All right, bye.
So
you weren't expecting me to know this much, were you?
No, I wasn't. I never do.
I'll drink my drink. Why are you doing that? Well, I don't think because they're in Greek, Norse mythology. Fuck words. North mythology. Are you going to say it to me in Welsh? Thank you.
Oh, it's the first time you've been loud in this podcast.